Hello everyone, welcome to this video introducing the BSS044-3 unit, which is International Business Management. We're going to take a look through the unit as a whole, the learning objectives of the unit, some of the unit topics, as well as the assessments. And then we are going to explore how the unit actually is going to run. So this is a 30 credit unit. It is the last taught unit on your course, so it is a large complex unit with a lot of material to cover. It traditionally would be given 4 hours of class time, but because we are experiencing a global pandemic which doesn't really look like it's going to ease anytime soon, so we have put a bit of thought into how this is going to run in the best way possible in a hybrid model. So instead of 4 hours of class time, we're going to have 2 hours of live online seminars. So you will be coming to 2 hours of a collaborate session every week. But the other 2 hours isn't time off. The other 2 hours will be taken up with a mix of pre-recorded lecture videos like this one and activities preparing for the seminars, as well as a mix of stretch activities, discussion board activities, quizzes and so on that should be done either before or after the seminars. So to make sure everything is nice and clear and also to have a bit of fun, we do have a study guide every week which clearly lays out what the activities for that week are, as well as assigning points for various activities. So we are going to be keeping track of the points for each student, and then whoever gets the highest points total at the end of the unit will get a nominal prize. Now, I would love it if I was rich and could, I don't know, give you guys £1,000 as a prize. Unfortunately, the vast majority of your student fees do not come to your tutors or lecturers, so I'm afraid we're not very rich. So it will be a nominal prize. I haven't quite decided what the prize is going to be. I'm quite open to suggestions. But it is going to be awarded to whoever gets the highest points total at the end. So if we start by just looking at the learning outcomes of the unit, which is always a good way of identifying what the unit is really about. And we do have two distinct learning outcomes, one looking at knowledge and the other looking at skills. So the first learning objective is looking at how international businesses operate within this strategic context, and we've got two key terms here. The first gives us a clear indication of the focal point of the unit, which is going to be international businesses. But the perhaps the more important term here is strategic context. So the strategic context of international businesses is the international arena. International businesses operate on a vast international stage, which has lots of other international actors which they have to interact with, have varying degrees of power relationships with, and really are part of a broader international arena. In some ways, we can understand international businesses as being on par with other international actors such as countries, nation states, transnational organizations, supranational organizations like the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, as well as organizations like the EU and other trade bodies. Looking, as well as INGOs, international non-governmental organizations that have significant impacts, as well as diasporas, so groups of people as well that cross borders and nations. So there's a crowded international arena, and that's very much how we're going to understand international businesses. So we're not going to look at international businesses in the abstract and say, well, an international business does A, B, and C, and that's what you need to know. We're going to look at international businesses within their actual context. So how do they actually operate? How do they navigate these various borders? And what the symbiotic relationship actually is. So international businesses influence the international arena just as much as the international arena influences international businesses. So this means it is going to be a complex course, complex unit, and we are really going to dig into some of the fault lines and some of the major trends. is worth mentioning that the international arena is probably about as unstable and dynamic as it has been for a good number of years. So it's something which we are going to have significant attention towards. Increasing international tension, the rise of frankly a fascist global movement with lots of sub-national movements and various other things as well. In terms of the skills and abilities of the second learning outcome, we do want to evaluate international business practice using particular concepts and frameworks. So we are also going to try and evaluate particular operation of international businesses in particular functional areas, and that is going to be a key part of how we approach the assessments. Speaking of the assessments, we have two, as most units do. One is an exam, so 60% of the unit is going to be assessed in an exam, which is going to be at the end of the unit. So that's typically in week 14 or 15 the exam is held, but make sure you do keep an eye on your the examination information for students, Brie or Shell, for the exam's timetable near the end of the unit, and it is going to be a 3-hour exam. Now, the exact length of the exam does depend on whether it's physical or not. So if it's a physical exam and if there is a magical vaccine and everything's back to normal, which looks quite doubtful, but if that is the case, then it is going to be 3 hours. If it's an online exam that you're sitting via Brio, then it's likely the exams office is going to change that, and it may be slightly longer, typically 15 minutes or to an hour longer would be my guess. But that's up to the exams office to decide closer to the time. Your first assessment is an individual business report, and that is weighed at 40%. You're going to be looking at recommending entry modes, a new market to enter and entry modes for an international business, and that's going to be, the submission for that is going to be in week 10. Both for the exam and the individual report, we are going to have sessions dedicated during the live seminars, as well as activities outside of the live seminars aimed at the assessment. So please do make sure you follow along with the study guide, and when there is an assessment briefing session marked, make sure you read through the assessment brief or the revision guide when it's released, and come prepared with questions or concerns or queries that can then be answered during the assessment briefing sessions. If we move on to the unit topics, so there are 12 weeks and therefore 12 distinct weekly topics, and they are a mix of looking at the broader international arena and looking critically at some key, usually ethical issues, and then also looking at the practical tools and techniques that international businesses use to navigate their environment and their context. So in the first half of the unit, we do have a significant portion. The first 3 weeks really make up looking at what's distinctive about the international arena compared to the domestic arena. So obviously an introduction, which is this week, looking at political and legal systems, as well as cultural differences, to understand really the distinct differences and the dimensions of difference when it comes to different markets and different population groups in the international system. Then we are looking at country selection and entry modes, which is going to be key for your first assessment. So how organizations actually select new markets to enter, as well as the methods that they use to enter those new markets. And then we're going to end with a 2-week session really looking at ethical issues, and particularly corruption and forex, which is the foreign exchange markets. So it's part of what we really want to do in this unit is to look at the reality of how international businesses operate, and that does involve dealing with what are quite murky ethical issues in many cases, and also recognizing that international businesses aren't just affected by their environment, but they actually have a two-way relationship with their environment. So they maintain and influence their environment, whether that's national, international, social, political, or cultural, as well as being influenced by that environment. So that is something we'll focus on during weeks 5 and 6. Moving on to the second half of the unit, we are going to be looking at more technical topics. So looking at how international businesses actually use various tools, techniques, frameworks, and models to make key strategic decisions, as well as how they operate at an operational level. So international supply chains and supply networks, looking at the reality of regional integration. So if you've been bombarded with phrases such as things like customs union, and various other terms during the Brexit debate, we are going to take a deep look at regional integration, how it practically works, and what the impact of various regional integration efforts like the EU actually are. The Global South, which is my preferred term for the group of countries that you may hear as developing countries or the third world, and we are going to look at how these terms actually reflect differing understandings of how the value and the position and the purpose of these different frameworks, and then looking at how international businesses deal with marketing and HRM challenges, which are particular problems for any company which is operating across national borders. And ending with a look at emerging trends. As I said before, this is a very unstable time. It's a very dynamic environment over the last 5 or 10 years. Lots of reconfiguration and changes in the international arena. And that is something we're going to look ahead and try and identify what the most important or consequential of these trends may be. So that's given us an understanding of how what the unit is actually about and what we're going to cover, but we're also going to look at how we're going to move through the unit, and the core of that is going to be the study guide. So as I said before, this is a blended unit. Some stuff will be live as part of the seminars, but lots of activities will not actually be seminar activities, but done independently or done in different ways. So the only way for us to make sure that everyone is on the same page is to stick to the study guide. So we do need to see the study guide every week. So if you go into the Brio shell, you'll see that there's obviously weekly learning blocks, weekly learning folders under your study program. But if you open up any of those weekly folders, the very first thing you should see will be a document label start here and then the week number. So this is the study guide for that particular week. The example that we see here is from next week or week 2 and it's something which has to be read through before you start any activities, before you start watching any videos, and it will lay out exactly what's going to be done that week, what activities should be done, as well as anything that you need to know about that week in particular. So it's going to list all of the activities and give 5 distinct batches of information. So we have 5 distinct columns here for each activity. The first category, it will break down into 3 distinct categories: must do, should do, and aspire to do. These are relatively straightforward. Anything which is labeled must do needs to be done. If you fail to do any of the must-do activities, that week potentially is going to make no sense to you, and that is potentially going to have a big impact on the assessments or your understanding of these topics at large. So it really is important that all of those activities are done without fail every week. The should-do activities generally should be done, but there may be some weeks that you're focused on the assessment or perhaps busy revising, or perhaps you're looking to catch up on previous weeks. So there may be the occasional week where the should-do activities aren't completed. But generally speaking, unless there's a reason that they're not done, they should be done. Aspire to do are activities which are stretch activities. So if you have a particular interest in that week, you have an interest in that topic, or if you want to push through and collect more points, then those aspire to do activities are there to stretch you after you've completed the rest of the activities for that particular week. There's also a column labeled when to do, and this is again pretty straightforward. There'll be certain things that have to be done before the seminar. So those are actually things which are feeding into the seminar. So this, if you haven't done a particular bit of reading or you haven't watched one of the pre-recorded videos before the seminar's likely to make no sense to you. So it really is important that the stuff labeled before the seminar you do before the seminar. And then there's some things you could do at any point that week. So that's any point or any time during that week, other activities can be done. And then obviously you'll have the what to do column, which explains what the actual activity is and where you can find different parts of that activity. But we also at the end have two additional columns labeled output and points. Now, output specifies for some activities there is a tangible thing which you're producing. It may be completing a worksheet, it may be doing a quiz, it may be posting on a discussion board, but then that means that there is a specific output which is actually needed for that activity to be complete. And usually that will be given some sort of feedback and will be monitored. Anything with an output also has points attached, and as I said before, we are going to have a unit wide and unit long competition, so the student on this unit that gets the highest points total will be receiving a nominal prize, something which I hope to find something decent and nice. But I am open to suggestions. I haven't made a firm decision yet. And you'll see that a lot of the stretch activities moving forward do have relatively high points totals to encourage you guys to try and get as many of the activities done as possible. So that's the study guide. Please do make sure you look at it at the beginning of every week and you do follow it as you move through the unit. It will keep everything together. And even though this is a blended model, hybrid model of learning where some stuff is synchronous, some stuff is asynchronous, some stuff is in the live seminars and some stuff isn't. If you keep the study guide front and center as you move through the unit, everything should still make sense and you will be moving through in an organized way. In terms of the other elements of the unit, we are going to be depending on pre-recorded lecture videos, particularly when it comes to introducing new concepts or models. So if you think that long as you turn up to the live seminar sessions, everything will be fine, you will be in for a shock. We use the seminar sessions to explore topics, to bring a critical perspective to key models and theories, to have debates and discussions. We're not going to be using these seminars to explain major concepts and theories. Concepts, theories, and models will generally be introduced through pre-recorded lecture segments instead. We also obviously have a core textbook for the unit, and there will be textbook reading every week. Now, this isn't labeled as must do, it's labeled as should do, because it is something that you guys should be doing. You should be dipping into the textbook every week and reading along, but that is there to support you as you move through the unit. This is not a unit where we're basically going through the textbook and covering every single thing in the textbook. We are taking a blended approach, so we have lots of different material from lots of different sources that we're going to be using, but ultimately, particularly for the concepts of models and theories, the textbook is very useful, and there are specified chapters that you can read along to every week. A lot of the activities will split between these three discussion boards, worksheets, and weekly quizzes. So when it comes to discussion board activities, these typically will be read through a particular article and think about a set of questions or discussion questions, and then post your response or type a short response and post it on a particular discussion board. Now, I do want to say that peer-to-peer learning is really important. It's a really good way to solidify your understanding as well as be able to look at things from different perspectives. So I don't just want people to post their responses on the discussion boards. I really do want everyone to engage with other students' posts, to have responses to each other, to engage in a proper discussion. However, we do need to make sure that we follow a basic respect code, and you will find this posted on the Brio Shell, where because the unit covers a lot of international situations, a lot of ethical situations, and some fairly controversial topics, I want to make sure that everyone is aware. This is a university. We encourage free thinking and critical thinking. So we absolutely do want to have freedom for you guys to post openly and present your actual opinions and actual positions. We have to make sure, though, that we do so in a way which remembers that we do have an obligation to show respect to each other, and make sure that it's good faith discussions, and we don't devolve into things which are inappropriate, insulting, or offensive. But opinions themselves are can be expressed and should be expressed in a way which is academic. So, academics argue about all sorts of things and have all sorts of controversial positions, but making sure that the reasoning is on display, it's backed with evidence of some kind, or at least some solid reasoning. And it is respectful of other people's opinions and beliefs also. Other activities will be worksheet activities, and these will typically have a Word document that you'll download, go through, complete the activities and the questions on the worksheet, and then upload using a submission link to complete that particular activity and collect the points as well. And lastly, there will be weekly quizzes. Please do make sure you do the weekly quizzes. It's really important that you reinforce learning through things like quizzing and testing your knowledge, and this will give you instant feedback. So the quizzes are automatically marked, so as soon as you take the quiz, you'll be able to get your score, and then this will give you instant feedback on how well you've done, how well you've mastered the material, or you've understood particular topics, or if you need to go back and re-watch a lecture video or so on.